Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be dealing with a quick winter storm that we're going to be tracking for you guys. We're going to go hour by hour and kind of give you an idea of what you should expect through the day today, into tomorrow, and even into Tuesday for some of these areas. Some areas could be getting a quick 4+ inches of snowfall. We're going to be tracking this for you guys, as well as giving you my snowfall forecast at the end of today's video. So let's get right into it, and let's start off with your current watches and warnings from the National Weather Service there. We have some avalanche warnings for parts of Washington, as well as some winter weather advisories for Oregon and Washington as well. We have some high wind warnings and watches for parts of Wyoming and Montana there, as well as some blizzard warnings for one county in northwestern Montana in that red shade right there. We have some wind advisories for Southern California, as well as some winter weather advisories for the system that we're going to be talking about in parts of Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. We have some winter storm warnings in effect for those areas in pink for parts of Iowa and Nebraska, as well as some air quality alerts further to the north of there into parts of Wisconsin and into Minnesota. Now, your low temperature yesterday, or your high temperature actually yesterday, was in El Centro, California. They got to 83 degrees. That's in South Central California, right there, kind of in the desert areas of Southern California, where they got to 83 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's actually one of the lower high temperatures that we've seen over the United States recently. Most of those high temperature for the entire United States over the past few weeks actually were over 90 degrees, and most of them were centered over Florida and Texas. We're getting a bit of a change this time. We don't have that warm front set over parts of southern Florida, so those areas actually were fairly chilly for those areas, I guess you could say. They were in the 70s, low 80s instead of the 90s they were typically used to over the past couple of weeks. And the low temperatures were split between two areas in northeastern Minnesota. 25 miles east of Ely, Minnesota, they got to -24 degrees Fahrenheit, and 2 miles south of Brimson, Minnesota, also got to -24 degrees Fahrenheit. Your highest precipitation report, or rainfall report, was in Hollywood, Florida, which is in southeastern Florida. They got to 1.6 inches of reported rainfall. In the high snowfall report, and that's not a typo there, that's actually 46 inches in Boston, New York, where just south of Buffalo there, they had numerous 30+ inch reports, and that's because you had a wind coming out of the southwest, kind of like this, and that was bringing in that snow right to parts of, right to those areas right around Buffalo, New York, but you have to go south of there to the areas around Boston, around the areas just about 10 to 15 miles south of Buffalo to get into the heavier snowfall. Buffalo itself didn't get too much snowfall. They got barely up to 2 inches of snowfall in some of those areas, but you went just a few miles south and you got over 30-40 inches maybe in some of those areas. So really ridiculously cool how lake effect works, how you can be just a couple towns over and you don't have a lot, and then you go a couple towns to your south, to your west, to your north, and you have maybe up to 30 inches or more of snowfall. So really crazy stuff that happened in western New York yesterday with those lake effect bands. So here's what the current radar looks like, and I'm recording this as of around 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Central Time. We have some scattered snow showers back through parts of the northern plains into Iowa, South Dakota, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. And by the way, you can just check your weather app and check the radar because this will, of course, be updated, and this will be this exact radar image will be outdated by the time that you're seeing this video. But the general thing is that I'm expecting this heavy band of snowfall, which you see setting up from just west of Des Moines to about Omaha and areas in eastern Nebraska. I think that'll start to shift a little bit further to the north. If you actually looked at the loop of this, I only have the still image right here, but the loop of this shows that heavy snow band moved out of southeastern Nebraska and then moved further to the north and to the east. So if that continues, then some of these areas right around here should be getting into some of the heavier snowfall right around here. And as that system heads further to the east, I think those areas might just get stuck in that heavy band. And that's where I think you might see the max amounts out of the system of maybe even 6+ inches total accumulations over some of those areas. So here's what the European model is showing, and we're going to zoom in on parts of the Great Lakes and the Northeast and kind of give you an idea of what to expect in terms of the rain and snow and when to expect it. But before we do that, we have to look at the general broadened out picture, because this is a lot more telling into what's going to happen. And in the surface what happens on the surface, if it's rain, snow, a mix, is all going to be dependent on what happens just a couple thousand feet up above our heads and what's happening with all these air masses in the atmosphere. So the biggest biggest player in this system is going to be this high pressure over the East Coast. This was originally in parts of South and North Dakota, right over here, and that moved over to the east. That was what's bringing that was what was bringing that very, very cold air to the central part of the country. That shifted over to the east, and now some of the East Coast is dealing with fairly chilly temperatures. Definitely nothing as cold as what they were dealing with in the central United States, and that's going to create somewhat of a wedge of cold air into the eastern United States, east of the Appalachians, or basically from the Appalachians eastward is where that cold air should set up. Now, that might lead to a little bit more snow on the start of the system for parts of the areas closer to the coast. I don't think the coastal areas necessarily get in on the snowfall, but areas maybe 25-50 miles north and west of the coast start to get in on some of that snowfall. Now, we also have another high pressure out further to the east, and this high pressure, even though this high pressure to the east is going to continue to move out further eastward into the Atlantic, and it's actually going to move out of here in just a couple of days, and you're going to actually go into more of a milder pattern. This high pressure over the western United States is then going to overtake, and you're going to go back into that chilly, colder pattern, probably by the early part of March, unfortunately, for those of you who like the warmer temperatures. So we're going back into a bit of a colder look at it. Looks like as of right now. I think probably by early March, at least my forecast is for this to go back into a bit of a chillier pattern. You might get into the 50s, 60s for a lot of areas, but then I think those temperatures go crashing down into either next week or the week after, when that high pressure should take over. Now, you also might be wondering to yourself, well, there's nothing in northern Canada, or eastern Canada I should say. Why isn't the system moving up there? Why isn't it just gonna shoot up further to the east? You have a high pressure east of there. It could easily just go north of there, and the main reason is because of a system all the way out in Alberta and British Columbia in Canada. Now, this is going to be moving into parts of Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and then eventually into Quebec, Canada, and that's going to allow the system to, which is over the Great Lakes right here, to move further to the south. So that's going to suppress this further to the south. It's still going to be taking a fairly northern track, but it's not going to be able to move as far north as some of these other systems. It's not going to go all the way over the Great Lakes and leave much of the eastern United States in rain. It's just going to kind of be a flat system that moves basically east to west and impacts some of these areas with some lighter to moderate snow and rain. So now we can zoom in, and now that we know what's happening in the atmosphere, and this is what your radar image is expected to look like from the European model as of around 5, 6, 7 o'clock Central Time tonight. So we're dealing with that low pressure over southeastern Iowa, northwestern Illinois. We have some of that rain further to the south. We're starting to see that cold front start to set up on the southern end of the storm. We have some of that snow back through Michigan, Wisconsin, and even some of the areas in the lower Great Lakes. Personally, what I think is going to really set up as the rain snow line is going to be anywhere north of I-80 and basically east of I-77. That's what I think the rain snow line is going to look like. You have to go east of I-77 or north of I-80 if you're under any of those two categories. That's where I think the snow should set up, and I think the highways actually match pretty closely to what the rain snow line is expected to look like. So use I-80 basically as your benchmark. You go north of there, you get into some of those lighter to moderate snow showers, and that's where basically that rain snow line will set up. Again, we have some of that rain further to the south, snow to the north, and as we play this forward into later tonight and back through tomorrow morning, notice that your 32-degree line, which is colored in on the blue on this map, is all the way down into North Carolina. So we're dealing with a fairly chilly night over much of the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic, and this is going to set the stage for potentially a start of or an onset of snow that switches over to rain later on. So this system by this point is actually centered over central Lake Michigan, and this is going to be going over right over middle Michigan. It's going to cut through the state, and then it's going to head over to the east, and that's a fairly northern track for this time of year. It will be cold enough for parts of northern and central Michigan to stay all snow for the most part, but areas south of there into Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, or anywhere south of there basically is going to be mostly rain, just because it will be too warm with the system. It's going a little bit too far to the north for them to get into any of that snow, but that high pressure is still lingering on over the east coast. It's still somewhat over there, and you're still seeing a pressing in of some of that colder air from the north. So it's still cold by Monday morning. It does warm up as the sun starts to come up, and now we're dealing with snow setting up basically from Pittsburgh eastward through the Smoky Mountains of West Virginia, back through Western Virginia, Western Pennsylvania, Western New York. That's where we're dealing with more of your snow, lighter to moderate at times in some of those darker blues. We're even dealing with some mixing and or some rain as well. And then that system heads further to the east. Now, I'm questioning whether that rain snow line will actually get all the way down to DC. According to this model, the European model really hasn't been too good with the mid-Atlantic, and most of the models actually haven't. They've really busted on most of them. So I think in my snowfall forecast, which you're going to see in just a little bit, I'm going to push that rain snow line just a little bit further north of the mid-Atlantic. All of the systems this year have really underperformed for them, so I'm just gonna assume that this one will most likely also underperform, unless of course it overperforms, which that'll be the first time this winter that it really did overperform for those areas. And also another thing that I'm really watching out for is this band of snow that might set up for northern and northwestern New Jersey especially, and eastern Pennsylvania, as well as a little bit of north central Maryland might get into some of that heavier snowfall. Now that's a band of 1+ inches per hour up to 2.5 inches of snow per hour. That's very heavy snowfall. That's just over your area for maybe just 3 hours, and you already have 3 to 4 or even 5 inches of snowfall depending on how heavy the snow is. So I do think, and most models, including the NAM model actually, which was very well, it's one of the only models that have been doing well this year, really outperformed and really did very well with most of these systems that move through the Northeast and the Ohio Valley and the Great Lakes. And that model is showing 4, 5, even 6 inches in some of these areas that get stuck in this band. So I'm watching this band closely. I don't think a lot of people are paying attention to this, but I think it really could play a big part into how much snowfall eastern Pennsylvania, northwestern New Jersey especially gets in on some of that heavier snowfall. This then moves further to the north because we have a secondary low pressure trying to form south of New Jersey. That's going to pull away further to the north and to the east. We're dealing with snow back through parts of the interior Northeast, central, and northern New England, especially areas from I-95 and a couple miles north of there is where that rain snow line should set up in the Northeast. And then that system will continue to move further to the north and to the east. I think parts of Maine, especially coastal Maine, except not areas right along the coast. So I think you get 3 to 5 miles north of the coast, right over here, and that's where you're going to deal with heavy snowfall, because you're dealing with those winds coming out of the south off the ocean and bringing some ocean enhanced snowfall for some of those areas over coastal Maine. But the southerly winds will impact the extreme coastal areas. So if you're right along the beaches of Maine there, I don't think you'll be into too much snowfall, maybe just 1-2 inches of quick snowfall on the start. But you go north of there just by a couple miles, literally just by a couple towns over, or just a couple miles to the north, and that's where you're going to get maybe 3+ inches of snowfall. And then the system pulls away further to the north. That low pressure is all the way in the Gulf of Maine, so it's fairly far to the north, and then it's really pulling away by this point. By the way, sorry for this, I really want to zoom in on where the bulk of the storm is, but parts of New Hampshire, Maine, eastern Massachusetts, Rhode Island, that area do get cut off on this map. On my snowfall forecast, it will include this entire area, but I couldn't get a good zoomed in picture, so I tried to do the best I could and kind of fit in all of the areas that I possibly could, but it just wasn't possible. There weren't any options that fit the entire area. Now watch, we do have that 4, 5, 6 inch area right over this area that got into the heaviest snowfall. We see a general 2 to 4 inch event back through the Great Lakes, and also I'm watching a band of heavy snowfall east of Watertown, New York, and south of the Adirondacks that could get into some heavier snowfall. You're going to see a big theme with many of these models showing maybe 6+ inches in some of these areas south of the Adirondacks. Now that's mainly again from lake effect enhanced snowfall. Now here's what the GFS model is showing. We just looked at the European model. Here's what the GFS is showing. The GFS is a lot weaker, and it really has been super terrible this year with snowfall totals and snowfall predictions, so don't pay too much attention to this. We're going to look at a couple other models that have done better. So the GFS, fairly decent with how much snowfall it's showing. It's basically 2 or 3 inches lower than what all the other models are showing. So here's another model that I would take a little bit more seriously. Here's the Icon model. It also is showing that band of heavy snowfall, except it's a little bit further to the south. Again, I'm going to have to question how far south that really can get. It's showing that heavy band of snow over the southern Adirondacks, and then it's also showing a 2 to maybe even 5 or 6 inch event through parts of the Great Lakes and the Midwest. Now, Here's what the NAM 3cam model is showing, and the NAM model has been spectacular this year, like I stated before, with pointing out where the heaviest snowfall is going to be and really picking out these bands of snowfall. It's been the only model that I think I can really trust with these types of systems. So here's what this model is showing. This is the NAM 3cam model, and it's showing a band of 5-6 inches of snowfall over northwestern New Jersey, eastern Pennsylvania. It's also showing some heavier snowfall back through central Pennsylvania and parts of the Smoky Mountains, and it's also showing some of that 2 to 4 inch plus amounts over parts of Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, back through Iowa and some of the surrounding areas, even some parts of western Iowa getting up to maybe even 6 inches. And then it shows that band of snow south of the Adirondacks, as well as some more snow for the Green and White Mountains, which could get maybe 2 to 4 inches plus of snowfall. Now here's what the National Weather Service is showing, and they're kind of a blend of all the models, except I really disagree with them. I think they're going a little bit too low on some of these models, and I think especially the National Weather Service in Washington, D.C., Baltimore, I think they have this line a little bit too far to the south. I think you should push that just a little bit further to the north, in my opinion. So here's my snowfall forecast from today through Tuesday. I'm looking at under an inch of snowfall anywhere in the Great Lakes, the Midwest, basically from Iowa and Minnesota eastward, and that cuts through north of I-80 and then east of I-77 back through the northeast, especially the interior northeast. Now, this is only for under an inch. This is where I think you might actually get accumulation. Not to say that you might start off as some wet snowfall over parts of these areas in the Mid-Atlantic coast area. I think you might start off as a little bit of wet snowfall, although I really don't think it'll accumulate to too much of additional snowfall. So I don't think it's really too worth it to put it on the under an inch area, just because the under an inch area is mainly reserved for areas that I think will actually see some light accumulation at least. Here's that 1 to 3 inch area, and you can see through Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, northern Illinois, Michigan, I have 1 to 3 inches of snowfall, as well as for some of the Smoky Mountains in West Virginia, back through much of Pennsylvania, and then into parts of northwestern New Jersey, much of upstate New York, western Connecticut, western Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, and the southern 2/3 of Maine. That's where I'm looking at 1 to 3 inches of snowfall. Here's that 3 to 6 inch area, and I include parts of pretty much the entire state of Iowa, back through much of central and western Wisconsin, and then into northwestern, the northwestern lower peninsula of Michigan. I have 3 to 6 inches for those areas, as well as another area for eastern West Virginia, western Pennsylvania, western Maryland, central Pennsylvania, eastern Pennsylvania, as well as northwestern New Jersey and the Catskills in upstate New York. And then another area for where I think you could get into that band of heavier snowfall with lake effect enhancement for the southern Adirondacks, basically everywhere from Watertown eastward, and then back through southern Vermont, western Massachusetts, and then another area for central New Hampshire and the areas just north of the immediate coast of Maine there. That's where I think you could get 3+ inches, and I even have a couple pockets of 6+ inches. That one area where I think that band of snowfall, as it moves further to the north, could get into some of that heavier snowfall over Iowa, and then another area for the southern Adirondacks where I think you could get 6+ inches, mainly from lake effect enhancement, as well as some decent snow ratios, which on a 10-to-1 scale are only showing 4 or 5 inches. If you extrapolate that to a 13, 14, 15-to-1 ratio, maybe you could even see closer to 6, 7, 8 inches of snowfall if those snow ratios are correct. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.